Liberals have forgotten what free speech means. I mean, I could have told you that 7 years ago, but since you're my mate, Andrew Doyle, I'm going to give you a pass. Eh, Away from the horror unfolding in Israel, the past month has provided one long acid test for the West's commitment to liberal values. What are we to make of middle class BN peasants asserting that mass murder requires context of the overt anti Semitism and of a police force that makes excuses for theocrats calling for jihad on the streets of London? For some, this is proof of the failure of multiculturalism. For others, it is the final straw that broke the back of liberalism. Hate speech laws must now be strengthened, certain protests ought to be banned, and we must no longer tolerate the intolerant. Republican Senator Tom Cotton has called for those who express support for Hamas to be deported, and Donald Trump has promised to do so if re-elected. In France, Emmanuel Macron has outlawed pro-Palestine rallies on the grounds of maintaining public order, although his decree has been largely ignored. Closer to home, a pro-Palestinian protest has been scheduled in London for Armistice Day, a tactic surely intended to generate as much outrage and attention as possible. In that respect, it has already succeeded. Rishi Sunak has stopped short of a ban, but has called on the Met Police to make robust use of its powers to prevent the remembrance events being disrupted. In this, he is out of kilter with the majority of the country. Only 18% believe it should be allowed to go ahead. Well, the problem with that is, public streets paid for by taxis, people should be allowed to demonstrate on them, within reason. When I say demonstrate, I don't mean run around setting fire to family businesses and assaulting everyone in the street. I mean waving their little signs, shouting in their megaphones, yada yada, that stuff's fine. Liberalism has always been a tricky prospect, cherishing personal autonomy and freedom of speech up to the point where our behaviour encroaches on the rights of others. To ideologues, it is a poison because it rejects their insistence that we ought to follow a preordained set of rules. Some even claim that liberalism is itself an ideology, though I see it as the precise opposite. It is the repudiation of ideological thinking because it refuses to accept oversimplified interpretations of reality, or to outsource our decision-making capacities to an already established creed. This is why there are liberals on the left, the right, and everywhere in between. Yet it has been dispiriting to see our commitment to Enlightenment values being assaulted on multiple fronts. There are theocratic extremists who oppose free speech and would happily see blasphemers and apostates executed. There are Western activists intoxicated by the moonshine of intersectional identity politics, calling for censorship and other restrictions. And now we have those who once considered themselves to be liberal, pronouncing that there should be limitations to freedom of speech and assembly. Even those who have previously decried cancel culture appear to be relishing its impact on their opponents. A lecture at Liverpool Hope University by Professor Avi Shlaim, a critic of Israel, was cancelled out of concern for the safety and well-being of students. Michael Eisen, a geneticist at UC Berkeley, was fired as editor-in-chief of eLife magazine for sharing a satirical article from The Onion which took a pro-Palestine stance. Eisen, some have pointed out, had previously questioned whether cancellation really exists, but while a degree of schadenfreude is understandable, it's hardly helpful. I do agree with that. Whenever the people that go, cancel culture doesn't exist, and try and gaslight you with that bullshit, and then they get cancelled themselves, I will admit I do feel a little bit of schadenfreude, right? I do. I do. Right? It's very difficult not to. However, that does not mean that I support what is happening to them. I don't like it, left or right, I don't like it when anyone gets silenced or gets cancelled. I think everyone should be able to take part in the marketplace of ideas and other such things and all that. So it's not a good thing when it happens, regardless of who it happens to. There are no rule books to consult is there are no rule books to consult is liberalism's major appeal to those of a free-thinking disposition, but it is also the source of its instability, since liberalism, basically there are many different definitions of what it actually is. The authoritarian has no need to engage with his detractors, he can simply have them eliminated. By contrast, the liberal must find a way to coexist with those who yearn to see his freedoms quashed, to somehow reconcile himself with the multiplicity of human outlooks and their inherent incommensurability. But how can you run a marketplace of ideas while there are hooligans trying to overturn the tables? Now, there was a point, obviously, when I was a bit liberal. Yeah, live and let live, man, and like all this type of stuff. In an ideal world, that would be great. However, I've realised that there's a lot of ideologies, of races, religions, etc., that just can't live together. We can't. Me, I'm more of not an ethno-statist. A little. But But I mean, mine is more ideological coalescence. For example, there is a type of government that I would like to establish, which is paleo-libertarianism. You know, Hoppian paleo-libertarianism. That is what I would like. However, I do understand that there are certain types of people that do not wish to live under such a type of government. Now, the problem is when you establish a government over a geographical area and a large number of people within that area don't like the government, you're never really going to be able to make any type of real progress because you're going to have that part of the population frustrating your attempts to make any type of improvement at every single stage, right? So it actually hinders progress. What I propose, as far as Hoppian libertarianism goes, is people are allowed to go away and they can buy their own property, they can form their own country, that type of stuff. Like, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to buy a house and go, I am king of my front garden, which, since that house is technically their own country, they have every right to do. But you're going to get people that are going to, you're going to get some people that don't mind living in a multicultural society. They'd like their wide range of restaurants and stabbings and arson attacks and grooming gangs and stuff like that. And that's fine. If those people want to do that and they acquire a bit of land, they can have as much immigration to that bit of land as they want. It's their land, their rules, their community. They get to decide what happens to it. They get to decide the trajectory of its future. That's not a problem at all. However, I also want that for me. So if I acquire some land and I decide to be a paleo-libertarian, then that land, whatever happens there, is up to me. Immigration, zero. Nonsense, zero. fucking, fucking Indians, zero. Gypsies, zero. French, zero. Right? It will be paradise. but basically the way it works as well is if a bunch of people want to buy a big chunk of land and then they all live on it, and through mutual agreement, they go, this bit of land is now a fascist nation, or a conservative nation, or this is a communist nation. Shit, this bit of land is now a caliphate. As libertarians, we can't come in and go, you can't do that. It's their land, their rules. They've all done that by consensual agreement. That's completely up to them. If someone wants to have a no black sign outside of their shop, that is completely up to them. Now, as a result of that, there will be a lot of migration, funnily enough, because if people establish like a fascist state or a communist state or, little micro states, then people might want to go and live there. And the fascists are like, well, we want other, like, white European fascists. Yeah, you're welcome. Come and join us. Communists are like, we want bloody anyone and everyone, you just have to agree with communism. That's fine. So basically, in the long run, you would get ideological coalescence all over the place. Now, you'll get some states that would be white only, black only, brown only, Muslim only, Christian only, all that stuff. That would happen as well. But I think the overall vast majority of them would be more ideological. Right, but then, now that everyone's been sorted into their ideological camp, that means there's not really any need for democracy anymore because everyone has the government that they want. And if they don't like the government that place is running, they can move to another place, right? Because you are going to get people that want immigration, but it's going to be for people that believe in the ideology of that micronation. And then once everyone has been sorted into their little camp, everyone can work on making some actual progress that isn't being frustrated by a portion of their population. Because I believe that the democratic system breeds conflict on purpose. It does, by its very nature, it breeds conflict on purpose. It turns countrymen against countrymen, race against race, blah, blah, blah. It does all that, right? For us, every 4 years to vote someone in who makes no real change whatsoever. In fact, they make everything worse. So that's why I think my system's better. Where was I? I went off on a fucking tangent there, didn't I? This essential vulnerability is always tested in moments of crisis. Governments enact emergency powers when at war because short-term authoritarianism seems preferable to the alternative. So, when protesters at pro-Palestine marches in London are holding signs that openly celebrate the slaughter, rape and kidnapping of civilians, and an official advisor to the Met Police is filmed leading a chant of "From the river to the sea," there will always be pressure from a justifiably incensed public to resort to authoritarian remedies. So, for example, like I said, the government creates the problems and then sells the solution to the problems. Yeah, that type of thing. Even in peacetime, liberalism is susceptible to changing trends within the nation state. What happens, for instance, when the majority of any given population rejects the liberal values upon which their society is based? What if a government has implemented reckless migration policies that grant citizenship to those who do not recognise the value of individual freedoms? This is, like I said, see under my idea of ideological coalescence, all of that stuff would just get fixed. In such circumstances, the principle of democracy could be its own undoing. Oh, Andrew, I've been talking to you too much. Little quip at democracy there. Based, Andrew. Sweden is often considered to be a case in point. According to its national police chief, a rapid surge in migration over the past decade has led to an unprecedented rise in gang warfare between those who do not respect the rule of law. Yeah, Sweden used to be like a pretty fucking chill place. Like the Nordic countries used to be pretty chill, like for the most part. They still had like drugs and gangs and blah 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 like you would get anywhere else, but like not as bad as like other nations. Sweden, however, Jesus Christ, they have like AK and AK-47 grenade and bomb attacks like all the time now. Like, that's how bad it's gotten there. On a recent trip to Stockholm, I found myself discussing the implications with a group of residents. One woman expressed the view that Swedish people tended to take liberalism for granted and that they had assumed newcomers would be eager to adopt the values of the nation that had welcomed them. We've all made that mistake. I used to think that. Civic nationalism can work. I mean, in 5% of cases, maybe. Maybe it can. Now many fear that this was warm-hearted naivety, and that the government had not done enough to ensure widespread integration, which is also true for Britain, right? There's literally no need for anybody to integrate because they can go in there and find their own community. Like, see how they coalesce. They coalesce, or they don't need to learn English. They'll just find people that speak Pashtun or whatever language it is they speak with their community and their culture, and they'll congregate in little areas. That's why you get things like Chinatown, you get the Italian Quarter, because that's what immigrants did, dating all the way back in America. It's why you have Chinatown, you have Little Cuba, Little Italy, and all those places, because people went, I've moved from Italy to America, but I'm going to live where all the Italians are. Right? That's always been the case, and that's what's happening here in Britain as well, and that's what's happened in Sweden. So eventually you get whole neighbourhoods that just have this huge demographic shift, which means that the culture changes, the race changes, the ethnicity, etc. It all changes. And then that can have a knock-on effect of the rest of the country because they have access to all the areas around them. But I do feel under, Hoppe and paleo-libertarianism, that wouldn't happen because there'd be strong borders. And because everyone would be able to enforce their own borders in any way that they see fit. If left, and that's the thing is, there's no reason for us to come into conflict at any point now. Like, there's no elections, there's no ideological conflict. Everyone's drawn their little line in the sand and went, "This is my bit. You've got your bit, I've got mine. You have as much immigration as you want. I will have none." There's no reason for us to come into conflict anymore. And it's also, as well, we aren't also in your little country frustrating your efforts to make any progress. I think it works out. Liberal countries acknowledge their moral responsibility to offer asylum for those in need and typically take a compassionate view towards foreigners seeking a more prosperous life. At the same time, there must be a degree of societal consensus for the ethos of these nations to survive at all. Yes, basically, I think communities should be able to decide whether or not we have immigration. Right, I would say, tell you what then, don't like democracy, but let's put it up to a vote. And it's something the government would never do. They would never put immigration up for a vote in Britain because they know they would lose. They know for a fact that they would lose. For where such a consensus is jeopardised, either through mass immigration or radical domestic political movements, the temptation to dispense with liberal values is inevitable. But to call for the deportation of citizens who actively seek the demolition of our culture is to surrender our principles to the very people who oppose them. It is to resign oneself to authoritarianism in a perverse effort to defeat it. I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Andrew. I do believe that we should deport them because we were all the ones that worked to make this country good. We were all the ones that paid the taxes. These people haven't. And some of them are turning around and basically saying, we're here to take over. We're here to take over. So I think, basically if the person coming to the country doesn't plan to do the country, the nation, or its people any good, if they're coming over and say, oh no, I plan active interference in everything that you hold dear, then we should show that person the door. Inevitably, one thinks of Karl Popper's famous paradox that in the name of tolerance, we should claim the right not to tolerate the intolerant. This is often invoked by activists to defend censorship of their opponents, typically in the form of a well-known cartoon meme that decontextualizes and misreads Popper's formulation. Yeah, Popper, leftists post that fucking The Paradox of Tolerance comic all the time. You know that Popper actually had to come back out and re-clarify, that's not what I meant. By the way, he says it all the time, but leftists like completely ignore it. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. I think intolerance is a good thing. There are certain things that we are all intolerant of. Nonsense. Everyone's intolerant of that. Well, not the government or the elites, but like everyone's intolerant of that, and rightly so. Right, that's good. Like you'd be very hard pushed to find someone that would disagree with that. Like I would hope, right? So we are intolerant of abuse against women. You know, a guy that bashes a woman. You know, where I'm from, if a guy gets caught beating up his women, the neighbours come out and give him a fucking hiding, right? That's just the way it happens here. There are certain things that society does not tolerate. Intolerance, that things like gatekeeping. Like, there's certain people you don't want living in your neighbourhoods. For example, I live in a little remote village in bumfuck nowhere. I love it. Excellent. Nothing happens. It's amazing, right? However, a nonce get moved in to one of the streets. He wasn't there long. I believe three vans had to come out to fucking hold the crowd back. It was, just there was so much community spirit that day. It was great. So I think that people should be able to make those decisions. I think that the community should be able to make those decisions. Paupers, and also intolerance is a good thing. It enforces norms on society that people can agree with. For example, we don't tolerate rape or murder. Those people go to jail. We don't tolerate theft, right? There are certain types of intolerance that are good. They come out with a net positive. Like, if a guy's walking around all the time just being an absolute prick to everyone, everybody stops talking to him because they don't want to tolerate that, so he fucks off. Good. Because nobody was tolerating him, that arsehole is now no longer part of the group, and everyone is better off for it. Right? Intolerance is a good thing. And maybe not in every aspect. Most, maybe, I don't know. Popper's next sentence is often omitted, in which he emphasises that so long as public opinion and rational argument can keep them in check, suppression of intolerant views would be most unwise. Protesters who take to the streets to celebrate murder fall into this category because they are self-discrediting. They are impervious to reason, but their sentiments are so essentially rebarbative that there is no risk of public opinion shifting in their favour. But some might respond, if liberalism is so delicate and continually under threat, why bother with it at all? In short, because it works. For all the claims by identitarian activists that the Western world is a racist hellhole, few living in the era of Jim Crow could have conceived of the advances we have made since then. The triumph of social liberalism is evident in multiple studies that show how Western societies are the most tolerant and diverse to have ever existed. It is no coincidence that all of the major civil rights movements for black emancipation, feminism, and gay rights have traditionally been underpinned by a commitment to free speech and liberal ideas. Of course, it is only natural that our patience is wearing thin. Well, I know what you mean. Having already witnessed pro-Palestine protesters in London throwing fireworks at the police and chanting in support of Intifada on the tube, there can be no guarantees that such behaviour won't be repeated on Saturday. The timing seems not only calculated to maximise publicity, but also as a declaration for contempt for British values and history. But even if unruly and disrespectful, it would be self-defeating to ban the protest or to insist on deportations for the worst offenders. Taking action against direct incitement to violence is one thing, but compromising on our key values is another. If we renege on our principles, all at the very moment when they are most imperilled, we risk undermining the very foundations upon which our civilization is built. The authoritarian instinct may be a human constant, but with vigilance, it can be forestalled. And that is the end of the article. Yeah, I think authoritarianism is not is definitely not the way to go, because the source of the authoritarianism is always the state, and the state always, in every single instance, will act in its own best interests, not the people's, right? Which is why I think people should be able to go and make their own little countries, and, the smaller community thing is better. I think giant nations just don't work. They don't. Like, they just end up in conflict. They have giant wars. If you get two communities having a little bit of a fight, in fact, it's less likely to fucking happen because people are there in the shit. They're right there in these tiny communities right next to each other, so you're not going to get big, massive fucking boogaloos like you're getting in Israel and Gaza or Ukraine and Russia right now. And all that, and people might be a lot more reluctant to go to war because they are going to be there on the ground. like reeling into like fucking having to go into it, they stand a very high chance of dying. Whereas over here in the West, they're secure away in their nice little comfy bunkers, and they'll never even have to see a battlefield at any point in their life. But they still have the power to send young men to die on one. So yeah, doesn't work. But anyway, yeah, liberals have forgotten what free speech means. But as far as if you want to go through the street and do a pro-Palestine march or a pro-Israel march, then yes, that is your freedom of speech to do so. You absolutely have a right to do that. What if they shout spicy things? Yeah, they've got a right to do that. I mean, if you're asking me that, you obviously don't owe me much by now. But that is as much as I will say on that particular conflict, because like I've said many times before, I don't particularly care about it.